even to say goodbye. I offer my deepest condolences to everyone who's lost a loved one. Fathers and mothers, brothers and sisters, sons and daughters, and the many grandparents who've been taken. And to all those who grieve, we make this pledge that when we've come through this crisis, we will come together as a nation to remember everyone we lost and to honour the selfless heroism of all those on the front line who gave their lives to save others. We will remember the courage of countless working people, not just our amazing NHS and care workers, but shop workers, transport staff, pharmacists, teachers, police, armed forces, emergency services, and many others who kept our country going during our biggest crisis since the Second World War. We will commemorate the small acts of kindness, the spirit of volunteering, and the daily sacrifice of millions who placed their lives on hold time and again as we fought each new wave of the virus, buying time for our brilliant scientists to come to our aid. In that moment of commemoration, we will celebrate the genius and perseverance of those who discovered the vaccines and the immense national effort, never seen before in our history, which is now underway to distribute them, one that has now seen us immunise over 6.8 million people across the United Kingdom. And when those vaccines have finally freed us from this virus and put us on a path to recovery, we will make sure we learn the lessons and reflect and prepare. And until that time, the best and most important thing we can all do to honour the memory of those who have died is to work together with ever greater resolve to defeat this disease, and that is what we will do. I'm now going to hand over to Chris for the slides.
Thank you, Prime Minister. On this very sad day, I've just got three slides. The first is the number of people testing positive for COVID in the UK. And as you can see on this graph, the number peaked at an extremely high number. It is still at a very high number, but it has been coming down. I want to just put one caution on that, which is that Office for National Statistics data demonstrates a rather slower decrease, and I think we need to be careful that we do not relax too early. Next slide, please. The number of people in hospital with COVID is still an incredibly high number, over 35,000 people. And as you can see in this graph, it is flattened off. It is not still rising overall. It is substantially above the peak in April. And over this time, it looks as if it's coming down very slightly in some areas, including London and the southeast and the east of England. But there are some areas of the country where it is still not convincingly reducing. So it is still at a very high level throughout the country, and NHS staff are working incredibly hard with many very sick COVID patients. Next slide, please. And finally, on this day, the number of deaths. At the moment, this looks as if this has flattened out, but at a very high level. So the most recent 7-day average for deaths, the rolling 7-day average, is 1,242 deaths, an incredibly high number. And I think we have to be realistic that the rate of mortality, the number of people dying a day, will come down relatively slowly over the next 2 weeks, and will probably be flat for a while now. So we will still, unfortunately, be having additional deaths to add to that very sad total that the Prime Minister talked about. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Chris. Simon, anything you want to add?
Well, I think really just to thank my fellow staff across the health service for everything that you have done over the course of the last year. This Sunday, it'll be a year since the first 2 patients with coronavirus were treated in hospital in Newcastle, and it'll be a year since the first flight returned from Wuhan to Arrow Park Hospital for quarantining of people returning to this country. And it's a year in which over 250,000 severely ill coronavirus patients have been looked after in hospital. And those staff who've been looking after those patients also, of course, experience what this pandemic has meant as daughters and as sons and as parents and as grandchildren with family and friends and neighbours. And so this is not a year that anybody is going to want to remember, but nor is it a year that across the health service any of us will ever forget.
Thanks very much, Simon. Let's go to questions from the public now. Martin from the Wirral.
With vaccines well on the way, what are long-term plans to allow a return to travel and government working proactively with other nations to install safe travel mechanisms, including potential shared databases and any technology so we can get business growing as soon as possible?
Thanks, Martin. Well, what we want to do is look at where we've got to on the 15th of February. As you know, that's the date by which we hope to have vaccinated all the most vulnerable groups, the Joint Committee on Vaccination and Immunisation 1 to 4 groups, and see where we are in terms of reducing the spread of infection and what we've done to protect the most vulnerable. I think, Martin, it'd be fair to say that, as you've heard from Chris, the rate of infection is still pretty forbiddingly high, but at a certain stage we will want to be getting things open, but that will depend on us continuing to succeed in driving the level of infection down and rolling out that vaccine program as fast as we possibly can. And what I will be doing in the course of the next few days and weeks is sending out in more detail as soon as we can when and how we want to get things open again. But that will depend on us continuing to beat the disease. Let's go to Mark from Plymouth, please.
Will the government expect to extend school closures until Easter? What strategy will the government publish to ensure no child is left behind?
Mark, we will want to look very, very carefully at the data at where we've got to with the vaccination programme before we make our announcements about the timetables. As I just said to Martin, we're working as hard as we can to get things open. If you will recall, we really wanted to keep schools open, and we will want to reopen them, but we must do it in a way that is safe, and we must do it cautiously. I appreciate the huge efforts parents are now going to teach their kids at home, to look after kids who should be in school. School is the best place for pupils, and I know the educational damage that we risk doing by protracted lockdowns, and that's why the government continues to support all sorts of measures to help teachers. A big rollout of laptops, 1.3 million laptops that we've provided, and massive investments in catch-up tuition as well. Clearly, that can't be in tutoring and one-to-one help of all kinds. That can't be done whilst kids are at home. So what we will do, Mark, is work round the clock as we come out of lockdown to ensure that the kids who have suffered, pupils who have suffered from loss of learning, from differential learning across the country, get the attention, get the tuition and the support that they need, and we'll make sure that exams are fair and properly adjusted to reflect what everybody has been going through in the last 12 months. Let's go to Laura Koonsberg of the BBC.
Thank you very much. And everyone's thoughts tonight are with those who have lost loved ones, their families left behind. But Prime Minister, near the start, the hope in government was to contain the numbers to 20,000. It's now 5 times that. What went so wrong? And to the others, can you give us any idea of the range of the possible totals that you are looking at now? What are your expectations?
Well, Laura, I think on this day I should just really repeat that I am deeply sorry for every life that has been lost, and of course as Prime Minister I take full responsibility for everything that the government has done. What I can tell you is that we truly did everything we could and continue to do everything that we can to minimise loss of life and to minimise suffering in what has been a very, very difficult stage and a very, very difficult crisis for our country. And we will continue to do that, just as every government that is affected by this crisis around the world is continuing to do the same.
I think in terms of the range of totals, I've always been very careful not to try and make forward projections on terms of numbers. All I have said earlier on, and I will repeat this, is unfortunately we're going to see quite a lot more deaths over the next few weeks before the effects of the vaccines begin to be felt. And I think we have to be realistic that that is going to happen. But trying to actually put a number on that I don't think is helpful to anybody. I think what we really should do is do everything we can to try and prevent that. And that is a combination of rolling out the vaccines, as the Prime Minister has said, but also all of us doing our bit in terms of staying at home, except where we have to. And that's something which I know the entire country is doing, and that is really the key to the next few weeks.
We can just add one point,
of course, Simon.
Prime Minister, which is that fundamentally the driver of the death rate is the infection rate. Set against that, we are seeing continuing improvements in hospital treatment for severely sick coronavirus patients. Crudely, the in-hospital death rate has fallen from about a third to a fifth, and we do expect that there will be more treatments for coronavirus looking out over the next 6 to 18 months perhaps. We've already seen those with some of the corticosteroids, some of the rheumatoid arthritis drugs that have been repurposed. There are antivirals in the pipeline. So looking out, I think we can see a world in which coronavirus may be more treatable, but for right now, it's a combination of reducing infections and getting vaccinations done. And as we stand here this evening, 1 in 8 adults across this country have now had their first vaccination. So we are well on our way.
Thanks, Simon. Thanks, Laura. Paul Brand of ITV.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Prime Minister, 20,000 deaths was once described as a good outcome. How would you describe the outcome of 100,000 deaths that you've presided over? And to Professor Whitty, what would you say to care homes who are telling us tonight that they are concerned about the gap between the first dose of the vaccine and the second dose, and who are calling on the government to close that gap back down to the recommended number by Pfizer?
Paul, I think that you'd exhaust the thesaurus of misery. It's an appalling and tragic loss of life, and there's no question about it. And all we can do now, as Chris has just been saying, is work together with the tools that we have of the stay-at-home principle plus the vaccines to defeat the virus. And as I say, I'm sure that we will.
In terms of the gap, I'm going to give a relatively technical answer because I think this is important that people who are listening to this, who've had one vaccination, actually understand the logic behind it, because I think this is a key question. The first and really critical point, which I think everybody understands, is our limitation is the number of vaccines available. That's true here, it's true in every other country as well. So therefore, by definition, if you give a vaccine twice to someone, you can only give it to half the number of people over a period of time. So the first reason for delaying the course of the vaccines is to double over the next few weeks the number of people who can actually have a vaccine and get some protection. The second point on this is the great majority of the protection comes from the first vaccine that someone has, the great majority. And that's true for the Pfizer vaccine, it's true for, as far as we can see, the Moderna vaccine, which is coming, and it's true for the AZ vaccine. So the great majority of this protection is from that first dose. And therefore, what we're doing is we're giving a first dose to twice as many people. Now, the third thing people say is, well, might we have a situation where the immunity suddenly wanes between 3 weeks and 12 weeks? And there is no evidence for that for natural immunity. There is no evidence for that for the AZ vaccine. And there is no evidence for that in the Moderna vaccine, which is very similar, it's another RNA one, to the Pfizer vaccine. So that side of things, I think we are confident of. The final reason that people are worried about is, well, could this give rise to a situation where there's an increased risk of something developing in terms of a variant of this in the period of the 8 weeks, and that's a theoretical worry. But there may be data, there certainly is data from AZ to imply we may get at least as strong a response, and for AZ at least, possibly even a stronger response for having the longer period of time, which means that will be a stronger period and for a longer period of protection afterwards, which will help protect the vaccine as well as the individual person afterwards. So there's lots of reasons why we think, we've thought very carefully about what the balance of this is, but the balance of risk in terms of reducing the number of deaths in the community, and I really want to stress that, that is the aim of this, is to maximise the number of people who get that first dose where the great majority of the protection comes from.
Thanks, Paul. Sam Coates, Sky.
Prime Minister, you just said we truly did everything we could to save lives. Do you really not reflect on whether some of those 100,000 deaths could have been prevented if you'd made decisions differently and perhaps followed scientists' recommendations more closely? Professor Whitty, do you wish you could have done more to encourage a lockdown or circuit break, as Sage suggested, in September rather than having to wait till the end of October? And Sir Simon, do you think that there was too much household mixing in December?
Sam, I just want to repeat what I said really to Paul and to Laura. We did everything that we could to minimise suffering and minimise loss of life in this country as a result of the pandemic, and I'm deeply sorry for every life lost. What I can say is that the government will continue to do everything we can to minimise life lost as we go forward, and I continue to urge people, as Chris has just done, to follow that guidance and stay at home and protect the NHS and save lives.
In terms of the question you asked me, I mean, the data, what we have now is a situation which is quite different to what we had in September, and I think it's important that we recognise that. The new variant has changed the situation we're in very substantially. The question about when to actually do particular measures has always been a matter of trying to balance, and I've said this repeatedly throughout this tragic pandemic, balance the things which actually reduce the risk of transmission with all the other things we're trying to do in terms of society staying functioning over what has been a very long period of time, and unfortunately one we're not through at the moment. And that's something which political leaders have had to balance really difficult things. The scientific evidence is clearly something which is one part of that, and something which people have tried to make as clear as possible, and all the minutes are published, and that's all it's extremely clear what the evidence on that is. But I would go back to saying the thing which we have, which has made things very different in 2021, has been the problems of the new variant, and that was not predictable in September, although that is something we are trying to do something to address now. And that's the reason we were worried 2 weeks ago that the measures we had at the moment were not enough to hold this new variant. I think what the data I showed you at the beginning of the slide sessions shows is that the rates are just about holding with the new variant, with what everybody is doing. Our big worry was that we wouldn't even be able to hold it. It's going to be much harder because of this new variant, and I think we have to be realistic about that.
What I'd say, Sam, is three things. First of all, in terms of the underlying causes of spread, I think we defer to Chris and to the epidemiologists. But secondly, the facts as we see it in the health service are that on Christmas Day, we had 18,000 coronavirus positive patients, and now we've got just under 33,000. But the third point is that we've seen that growth rippling up from the southeast, London, to the east of England, and then up to the Midlands, which is consistent with the spread of the new variant of the virus.
Thanks very much, Sam. Pippa Crerar, The Mirror.
Hello. Prime Minister, in the days and weeks approaching this sad milestone, have you spoken to the families bereaved by coronavirus? Do you ring them up privately or meet them on Zoom? And if you haven't, then why not? And if I could also ask you, NHS staff in Scotland were given £500 a bonus in recognition of their hard work during the pandemic. Even Lidl, the supermarket, has given its staff a £200 bonus today. Why haven't NHS staff in England had a similar gesture of support? And so, Simon, would you like to see them get one? Thank you.
Well, Pippa, the answer to your first question is yes, of course. I've talked to families of the bereaved and will continue to do so. And again, I offer my condolences to everybody who's suffered a loss of a loved one during this pandemic. And we do our absolute utmost to support our wonderful NHS staff, and have indeed had a 3-year pay package for nurses that I think was 12.8%, and will continue to invest record sums in the NHS. I think the amount we invested in the NHS even before the pandemic began was more than any time in modern memory, £34 billion package of investment, and that will continue under this government.
I think what I would say is that, having talked to many staff across the health service, obviously day in, day out, actually what people probably want right now is 3 things. First of all, to be able to look forward to some sort of respite from what has been just an incredibly demanding and continuous year of pressure. Secondly, to know that there are reinforcements on the way, that the staffing pressures in the health service will be taken seriously in the years to come, and there are some encouraging signs on that, but we've got to do a lot more. And then thirdly, to tackle the pressures in the here and now, which fundamentally are about reducing the number of new patients who are turning up in A&E severely ill with coronavirus day in, day out. So it's that combination, I think, a sense that there will be some respite, a sense that the health service will get resilient with the staffing support that it needs in the years to come. But for right now, that actually we collectively turn off the incessant new admissions that are arriving with very severely ill coronavirus patients.
Thanks, Pippa. Harry Cole, the Sun.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Our readers with children are desperate for some clarity. This is not a question of when, but a question of how. Will children in lower case areas be allowed to go back to school first, especially primary school children who have the most to lose from this virus educationally? Will you phase back schools by age and region when it is possible to begin getting children back into the classroom? And if I may, there's been some saber rattling and some comments out of Europe looking at the possibility of blocking exports of vaccines produced into Europe to third countries like the UK. Can we get our response from you to that? And what measures are you putting in place behind the scenes to make sure that our vaccine supplies are not under threat from a hostile action such as that?
Okay. Thanks, Harry, very much. Getting kids back into school, primary kids back into school, as I said earlier, that's something that has been a top priority for the government, continues to be our top priority for any kind of reopening. Clearly, if we're going to go back after half term, February the 22nd, we're going to need to give 2 weeks notice. So what I can tell you, Harry, is we will be making sure that we give advice well in advance of that about what we hope to do, and give people some rough idea of when things might be possible. And that depends, as I've said earlier, on the rollout of the vaccine, where we are with the pandemic, the rates of infection, and so on. And on your excellent point about would there be a regional difference when we look at areas where the virus is less present. It's pretty much a national picture at the moment, but of course we will look at all those types of all those ideas on supply of vaccines from abroad and supply into this country. I've got total confidence in our supplies. We've been over this many times in the last few days and hours. We've got confidence in our supply. I've seen what Commissioner Kyriakides has said, and all I would say is obviously we expect and hope that our EU friends will honour all contracts, and we will continue. We fully expect that will happen, and we continue to work with friends and partners in the EU and indeed around the world, because the delivery of the vaccine has been a multinational effort. The creation of the vaccine has been a multinational effort, and the delivery of the vaccine is multinational as well, because the virus knows no borders. I think that was it. I don't think you had a question for either of my colleagues. Let's go finally to Charlie Cooper of Politico.
Hello, thank you for having me. It's a terrible milestone we've passed today. Prime Minister, you spoke about learning lessons. Can you give a concrete example or several concrete examples of what you are doing or planning to ensure that we never see the terrible loss of life in the UK again, because this will not be the last pandemic? And just to follow up on the question about the EU, would you urge the EU against the kind of vaccine controls on exports of vaccines that have been suggested?
So would I urge the EU to do what?
Against
them? Yes. So sorry, so I wasn't quite sure of that. Yeah. Look, Charlie, thank you very much on what we're doing. Let's be in no doubt that the UK is in a radically different position now from where we were 12 months ago when it comes to pandemic preparedness or dealing with an epidemic of this kind. We have huge quantities of not only huge quantities, for instance, of PPE, but we have the ability to make it ourselves. We've created an indigenous industry to do not just to conduct lateral flow testing, but to make lateral flow tests. We have a vast test and trace industry. NHS test and trace has been built from scratch, is now a colossal operation that is actually doing amazing work in isolating incidences of the disease and helping us to find out exactly what is going on and where. The UK is also, I've asked Chris and Simon to comment on this, but the UK is also out in front in conducting genomic testing of the virus cases, so that we know exactly what type of virus. And 47% of all the genomic analysis in the world is now done in the UK. You'll have seen what this country has done in terms of creation of the viable treatments for the virus, or pioneering viable treatments in the form of dexamethasone, and clearly we are out in front in the manufacture of or the creation of, or one of a group of countries that is doing well in helping to create vaccines. None of that is, of course, any consolation for the terrible toll of life that we're forced to announce today, that I'm forced to announce today. But I can tell you that things are really very different now in the UK as a result of the pandemic, and our readiness for any future pandemic is really colossal by comparison. But that's probably no particular surprise to you or to our viewers. I think people would expect that, and quite rightly. On your point about the vaccines and our friends in the EU, I would just repeat what I said. The creation of these vaccines has been a wonderful example of multinational cooperation, and I think that one of the lessons we have to learn, the world has to learn from the pandemic, is the need to cooperate and to make sure that we do things together and we understand how to fight these pandemics together. So I don't want to see restrictions on the supply of PPE across borders. I don't want to see restrictions on the supply of drugs across borders, and I don't want to see restrictions on vaccines or their ingredients across borders. And I think that's pretty commonsensical, and I'm sure would be widely supported across the EU as well.
There's a huge amount we have learned, are learning, and will learn about this. I'll take just three broad groups. There's things we've learned scientifically. We now understand the virus in a way we didn't, and some of the science has undoubtedly changed. Some of our understanding of what the science meant has changed. For example, we were initially quite cautious about whether masks were useful. We decided that they were, based on increasing levels of evidence. We initially didn't realise quite how strong the importance of asymptomatic transmission was, for example. I think we now recognise that's a very major part of it. Then there's things we've learnt clinically, and the reason, as Sir Simon said earlier on, that the death rates have gone down is doctors are learning the whole time. Some of this by randomised trials like dexamethasone, a variety of other trials, many of which are led from the UK, because we have a very strong tradition of evidence-based medicine, but also just by clinical practice, which is the way that doctors and nurses learn how to improve treatment in different areas. And we've learned things operationally. Very obviously, that means that we can do things now that we were not able to do and didn't understand how to do early on, and we will continue to learn. And I think we need to realise we're going to have to continue to learn the lessons from this pandemic, because there is a lot for us to learn from it.
Thank you, Charlie, and thanks very much, everybody. Thank you.